Hey, I'm James from Dad BBQ, and today we're starting early. It is just after 6 in the morning, and we are going to fire up our Kamado Joe for a low and slow indirect cook, and we have two Boston butts that we're gonna cook. Pork butts, Boston butts, pork shoulder, it's all going to be the same. It's delicious. Let's go ahead and set up our Big Joe for our indirect cook. I'll show you how I'm going to add some smoking wood to the bottom, cover that with some coal, fire it up, and then we'll go inside and we'll season up our pork butts. Now before we do that, I will point out that yesterday when we got the pork and brought it home, went ahead and added a liberal layer of Diamond Kosher crystal salt to help salt bind those. So those have been sitting overnight on an air rack. I'll show you a little clip here on a tomahawk where I did the exact same thing, just so you get a sense for how much salt I'm talking about when I say liberally seasoned, so you get a little feel for how much salt you should be adding. So now that we've added that salt, we're not going to want to use a rub that is too salty, but I've done this one a couple times before and I know the crust will come out perfect. So we'll get to seasoning in a minute. In the meantime, let's go ahead and set up our Big Joe for our low and slow indirect cook. So as you can see, I've already cleaned out our charcoal basket and emptied the ash collector tool into a bag, so we are ready to set up. Today for smoke, I'm going to be using a piece of Texas post oak, and I'm going to put that in the center, right in the middle. So we did a little bit of separation there of the charcoal. I'm now going to push that back together and start to cover it and add a little bit more charcoal on top to cover our smoking wood. Okay, so we'll just let the dust settle there, but you can see that should be more than enough charcoal for our all-day low and slow smoke session. So you can still see some air holes all the way around the outside, and you can still see some air on the bottom vent. So we're going to get great airflow. One of the keys to good smoke on the Kamado Joe is a much smaller fire burning better versus filling this basket completely, and it just sputters and chokes along and you just constantly get white smoke. So this might even be too much. We'll find out. We'll take a look at the end and see how we did guessing with our charcoal. I think that's going to be the right amount. So now we'll go ahead and we'll add our fire starter cube and fire it up. I've already got the bottom draft door open and the top vent all the way open. So now it's just time to light it. Okay, now that we've got a little bit of a fire started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install our X-ring accessory on the middle position of the divide and conquer rack. And then I'm going to install the deflector plates on a wide open pizza position so that that heat can continue to come up and build some heat in our dome. I'm thinking I want to cook somewhere today in the neighborhood of 225 to 250 degrees. So I'm going to wait until I see 225, 250 degrees, maybe a little bit warmer in the dome before I go ahead and close those plates and get ready to add our food. So let's add our heat deflector plates, and I'm not going to install the grids yet, so we still have access. Okay, that looks good to me. So what that's going to allow us to do is preheat our ceramics so that they're slowly coming up to temperature, and we won't have a big variable throwing us off when we're trying to dial in our temperature a little bit later on. And it's also going to allow that heat to come straight up and get some heat into our upper ceramics, so we know we'll be steady. Let's go ahead and close it up, and then we can go inside and season up our pork. Alright, so now we have our pulled pork all seasoned up. Our Big Joe is up to temperature. Now, just in terms of timing, it is almost 7 o'clock, and so we started this just after 6. Now, we're doing some video, playing around. I need some coffee, but that was about 30 minutes or so in order for our fire to get hot, our smoke to run clean, and I'll give you a little bit of a close-up shot so you can see what I mean, that clean blue smoke. You don't want that white billowy smoke that you get when the charcoal first ignites and when your wood starts burning. But it's time to close our vents, add our grates, push those deflector plates together, and then go inside and bring out our pork, throw it on. All right, so as you saw in fast forward there, we went ahead and added our pork shoulders to the Kamado Joe. Insert our meter probe past that line that it says to insert to. Set it up on our app, and I'm going to look for an internal temperature of 197, 200 degrees. What I haven't decided yet, based on time, is if we're going to leave this unwrapped and go the whole way, or if around 165 to 170 degrees, if I need to wrap it. And the way that I'm going to figure that out is by doing a work back schedule. If we want to have this done for 5 o'clock tonight, I want at least an hour, probably 2 hours of rest. So that means I want to be done by 3 o'clock. So what I'm going to be looking for 2 hours before that is to be well in that range, if not past 165. If I'm past 165, around 1 o'clock, I'll just let this continue to ride, cook, and then we'll wrap it and let it rest for a few hours. If I'm struggling to get that temperature, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the Texas crutch, wrap it in some foil, and help speed up that cooking process so we can still get that rest. The rest on these large cuts of meat is really important, almost as important as any of the steps that we're doing to get to that point. So you don't wanna just like butt up right against pork butt, right up against the 5 o'clock deadline and then start shredding into this thing, as it won't be as tender and as juicy. So I've set the bottom vent to about 2 fingers width and the top vent to the very first line. We'll just give that about 15-20 minutes, see if we stabilize, and if we need to add a little bit more air or touch less air, we'll make those micro adjustments and we should be good to go. We can go enjoy our day, check on this every couple hours. I might spray it with some water if it looks like it's drying out in any of the corners or edges, but I think we'll be set. So I'll see you later on today when it's time to intervene and do something different to get this ready for tonight. All right, so we are right at the 5-hour mark, and as you can see from our meter temperature chart, that line has been holding right steady at around 242, 243 degrees. So I haven't opened the dome since I last saw you, so let me bring you a little bit closer and we can find out together how our bark looks. Now the reason we're opening it now, and I have the tin foil and the apple cider vinegar behind us, is again following that work back schedule. If I want 2 hours of rest and I want to be done somewhere then around 3 o'clock, if we're going to eat at 5 o'clock, looking at the time now, it's 12:30. So we're starting to need to accelerate our cook here. And so this Texas crutch wrapping it in foil will absolutely do that. So we're going to wrap it in foil, add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and we're going to bump that heat anywhere from 270 to 300 degrees. I think will be perfect. So let's go look together, check out our bark, and then we'll wrap these and get them back on the Kamado Joe. All right, so now that these are sitting around 158, 160 degrees, they're still tough as nails. This isn't something that would pull very nicely. You can see it's got a lot of resistance to it. Perfectly safe to eat at that temperature, but we want pulled pork, not sliced pork. So we want to get this temperature up over 200 degrees to the point where this probe almost falls right through when we insert it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the meter out now. It's done its job of helping us track the internal temperature and make sure our dome temperatures are consistent. And so we're going to now just focus on the internal temperature. We know our bark is set because it passes the scratch test. The scratch test is when, you know, you can rub your finger along on the bark and nothing comes off. So that's got a nice, you know, crusty feel to it. So that's absorbed about as much smoke as it's going to. 4 or 5 hours is your maximum for, you know, the meat still absorbing smoke. So now I'm not going to be worried about wrapping them and continuing the cook in foil. So take it fast forward for that part of the process. All right, so as you saw in fast forward, pretty easy. All we want to do is get a layer of foil, start building a pouch. I added about 2 tablespoons worth of apple cider vinegar, wrapped that up as tight as I could, and since it was just barely covering, I went ahead and double wrapped it, and that's just going to help make sure that steam's not escaping and doing anything to dry out our pulled pork. We want that just to sit and braise in that apple cider vinegar. So I'm guessing this will be about 2 hours, but we're going to go ahead and check on it in 90 minutes from now and see where our temperature's at. We don't want to overshoot it, but I think we'll probably be a little bit closer to 2 hours. Anyways, I'll see you in 90 minutes when we go and check on our probe feel and temperature of our 2 pulled pork butts.
All right, our pork has been in the foil. We ended up going for about 2.5 hours. So we are now just past 3 in the afternoon. So we got really close to hitting that 2-hour rest goal that we want. Let me bring the camera a little bit closer so you can see what I'm talking about, probe tenderness. And then we're gonna do the FTC method. If you've never heard of that, that's foil, which we already have, towel, which I've set aside, and cooler. And we're just gonna wrap that foil with a towel and go ahead and put it in the cooler for the next 2 hours, and then we'll be ready to shred it. So that's about the perfect tenderness that we want, where it's just got the slightest little bit of resistance to it. We're reading 208 to 210. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. So you can see that was the perfect amount of smoking wood because there's no longer any wood left, and we still have just a few coals that we could have kept some heat a little bit longer if we wanted to, but I think we guessed about perfect amount of charcoal for this 8-hour low and slow cook. So we're gonna let our pork rest, we'll make up some sauce, and then we're gonna go ahead and shred it in about 2 hours time. Okay, so I've tucked around the corner as our Canada Day celebrations with our bubble are in full effect, but I still wanted to show you how this turned out. As you saw on fast forward, it was pulling incredible. I can't wait to dig in. Let's find out how it is. You know, it doesn't get much better than barbecue pulled pork, and this South Carolina style vinegar sauce with some coleslaw on top of our sandwiches is just perfect. This is the first low and slow I've done with the Big Joe, and I was incredibly impressed with how stable it held throughout the whole cook. It might be one of my most stable cooks. I'll put a link down below to my foolproof tips for low and slow operation. I know we covered a little bit of that at the beginning, but if you're actually looking for the full Monty in terms of all the details and behind the scenes tips and tricks in order to get your Kamado Joe to hold steady Eddie for a whole day, I'll put a link down below so you can watch that. But key first observations are a little bit longer for the size to come up to temperature. So it took a little bit longer to get the ceramics up to temp. I mentioned earlier we were almost at the hour. Again, I was puttering and having some coffee, setting up. So maybe we could shrink that down to half an hour. But boy, oh boy, once it was up to temperature, was it just a champ, almost a flat line on our meter probe in terms of holding temperature. So this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate you hanging out. Until next time, I'm James from Dad BBQ, signing off.